Hi, welcome back to Polyam Parenting 101. I'm Jen. I work with queer, non-monogamous, and neurodivergent families through the joys and challenges of parenting outside the box. And David, you want to tell
Yeah,
us what
hi,
we're
I'm
talking about today?
David. Yeah, I'm David Pascal Haig. I'm a psychologist, researcher, and professor around sexuality, gender, and relationships. So today we're going to be talking a little bit about how to navigate when a relationship changes, maybe with a co-parent in particular, someone that you have been in relationship with, and maybe both have legal or parenting roles that make de-escalating more complicated, more emotional. So, Jen, what comes to mind for you when you get asked about this? How do
Yeah,
people
so
think about
the
this?
first thing is, most people from a monogamous lens think of if parents, like biological parents, break up, then we think of like a divorce and a parenting plan and
Yes.
not really having a relationship with each other beyond parenting anymore and things like that. And sometimes that's what it looks like when poly
Mhm.
parents break up. But we can also think outside the box and think more about, are there parts of this relationship that you want to preserve? Is it that you really would like to have as little as possible to do with this person? Or is it that maybe there's not a physical intimacy that's desired anymore, but you still enjoy spending time with each other? Or are there aspects of the relationship that you want to preserve and continue? And then,
Right.
of course, also thinking about, what are the roles going to be in the children's lives and making sure that any, resentment or anger that might exist between the adults does not carry over into, using the children as
Right.
a bargaining tool.
Right. I think especially about, the children not becoming the conduit for communication, but the adults who are de-escalating still having those conversations around what parts are we going to preserve and what changes. And I think it's a really important time where a mediator or a coach or a therapist can come in and just have that kind of perspective of helping that communication. There's a lot of, obviously emotion, history, energy that gets wrapped up in this. So having that outside perspective can be really important, especially if you fear or worry that your kids or child are going to get triangulated into that. And I think really, there is a very powerful step in reconceptualizing what relationships can look like. Just because one part of a relationship may be changing or ending or de-escalating doesn't mean that between adults there can still be very special parts of shared history and experience and those joys of, watching each other become what you're going to be in this phase of life, or watching someone you're co-parenting with or someone that you've been in a relationship with find love again or find parts of themselves that maybe weren't expressed in the history of your relationship. So I think there's a lot of obviously facilitation that needs to be done. I think individuals should also be engaged in maybe their own emotional process, right? Not just couples therapy or mediation, but thinking about their own grief or loss and also expectations. But I think the key there is the adults figuring out what steps to take and then having a unified approach to sharing that with the kids that are being co-parented, that it doesn't become one parent told me this and another parent told me that, but there's that unified front of sharing what the new family dynamic is going to look like.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up about the individual piece because I think
Mhm.
people miss that a lot when they're negotiating a
Mhm.
change in a relationship. They think about
Mhm.
the relationship and what's happening there, and they don't think about, sometimes if somebody expresses wanting to change a relationship, one especially wanting to remove something from a relationship, and it can bring up, am I not wanted? Am I
Mhm.
not lovable?
Mhm.
Fear of being abandoned, or
Yeah.
are my needs going to get met anymore? And all of that stuff is not about the relationship, especially if those emotional connection pieces are not going to be a part of that relationship anymore.
Right.
And it's really important to be able to have your own place to work through those things and
Hmm.
figure out what are you needing and wanting both in this relationship and in general in your life, so that you can be clear-headed when you do go to mediation or couples therapy or something like that. And you can be really clear about what is about this relationship and what are the things that are not about that.
That's a great point. And you're also getting into, I mean, the different varieties that can come out of this, right? There can be situations where, you know, a couple is saying, okay, we are still going to try and figure out what does family look like, or how do we keep parts of our relationship that still are important to us and really define us. And then there are those situations where, you know, maybe there is more of a split and a change and a de-escalating that means, you know, we're not cohabitating, we're not you know, having emotional bonds. And noticing that when it's maybe more on that end, and then you're in your time with your child, right? As they're talking about, okay, the other parent this or they've got that going on, you're going to have emotional reactions to that, right? When you start to hear about your former partner through your kiddo, right? And then how does that affect your relationship with your kid? So that's where I think that individual work really allows you to then have and cultivate that relationship with the child and who is, you know, still maturing and they're trying to figure this out as well. I don't ever want to overlook with my clients, you know, that the children are the ones who are also going through this as well. It's not just about parents figuring it out, but the kids are trying to figure out, okay, how do I talk to mom about what's going on at the other house? Or how do I talk to my dad about what I heard? You know, so they can be afraid of saying the wrong thing. So we need to make sure they have the support as well. So sometimes the kiddos can benefit from their own therapy space as well.
Yeah, and that is another thing that I always like to make sure to talk about with people as well is children need support through any kind of a parent change, you
Hmm.
know, a change in the parent and family dynamics, but especially if it looks something like a divorce or a
Hmm.
big breakup.
Right.
And that doesn't, sometimes it's helpful for that to be a therapist or something for the child. Sometimes it can be one or both parents providing that
Uh,
support. And the key that I like to ask parents to think about for themselves is, can you allow your child to have whatever feelings and thoughts they have about the situation without taking it personally, without feeling emotionally charged, without
mm-hmm.
being reactive, without trying to like shut them down or tell them they're wrong because it hurts you to hear it.
That's a great
If
point.
you can, if you have done enough of the work or you're getting enough space to talk about your stuff, that when your child says things, you can react with, like, I hear you, that's what it's like
Hmm.
for you, and
Right.
not take it personally, then you
Right.
can be that support person for your child. And if you are so in your own feelings and your own, you know, reaction to the situation, which is okay and normal and human,
Mm-hmm.
make sure your child has someone else who's not you
Right.
that they can talk to about those things, because
Right.
they need someone
To
who
be
can
that
listen
space.
without having a big emotional reaction to them.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's a key moment. I mean, we get so fired up in our own emotions that then we want to explain or we want to, you know, shut something down. But when, you know, especially our kids are expressing, they do need us to be that calm, collected, neutral space. And then we need, you know, maybe we do it in the hour after or in the day after we've had these tough conversations with our kid. We need that space to process. But when they're approaching us with their strong feelings, right? We need to make sure we're not so enraged or reactive that we're not able, we need to be that holding space. And, you know, we've said it in some other parts of this series as well, is, you know, the primary focus is the secure attachment, the safe and healthy emotional development of the children who are coming up in poly families, experiencing these things just like they would in monogamous families.
Yeah, and I think that that is one of the things that's really important for people to keep in mind, is because sometimes, besides the rage, I also hear fear from people,
Mm,
fear that just the fact of the de-escalation happening is going to be emotionally damaging to their
right.
kids. And there's, you know, there's a lot of research about divorce and families that kind
Mhm.
of reinforces that fear for people.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I also want to help people remember that children need parents who are happy and emotionally healthy.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if that looks like you and a co-parent no longer living together, but you are both healthier and happier and
Hmm.
thriving more and still supporting the child and working together as co-parents,
Hmm.
then that is ultimately better for a child than you forcing
Stressful.
yourselves to stay together for the kids and
Right.
being
Right.
miserable and angry, and the child living in that space of anger and resentment in the family.
Yeah, there's an approach, a framework that I sometimes take, and it's hard for people to conceptualize at first. But when we look at de-escalating, we can actually say there's a lesson and a lot of teaching in that about how do we end relationships well and how do we respect one another, right? So there's a lot of difficulty and a lot of upheaval, but what can come out of it is a model for our children and for the kids we're raising around how do you continue to love and respect someone even in the face of change. So the framework is hard when you're in those emotions to think, okay, what can come out of this is a really important lesson. And we're not sugarcoating anything, but saying maybe we don't do endings very well in our culture. Maybe we don't do breakups very well. And what a unique opportunity in de-escalating and particularly polyamory, to say, I can cherish what we have, what we had, and what still may be. And I don't have to be afraid of change.
Yeah, it's also a great time to introduce kids to the concept of chosen family, and that
Hmm.
your family will continue to include me. It'll continue to
Mm.
include your other
Right.
biological
Right.
parent. It's gonna, it's gonna include, maybe we're gonna see more of grandma because
Mm.
grandma is gonna like step up and help out
Right.
with some of the challenges here, or maybe it's gonna mean that we have a friend that we start having dinner with every week.
Yeah.
Like what are the other pieces of community that can come in to help both with that transition, but then also to give the child a concept of like who are all the important people in your life, not
Mhm.
just
Right.
bio parents.
Good. Good. Yeah, and I would encourage people, one step at a time, have your own adults that you speak to. Think about the developmental and emotional state of your kid, and you know them best, right? Kind of what we come back to in this is you know them best, and with consultation, you and your co-parent can handle things like this.
All right. Thanks,
Thanks.
David.